process.
All right, can we welcome, we stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think that was my computer all the time. It's got really nice fancy handles, because they're all scraped off.
So we're going to start with Mr. Little.
So everyone, the Board of Education has invited the director of the Rural Schools Association to our meeting tonight. He's a district president and also used to be a Board of Education member. So it's my honor to introduce you all to Peter Little, Esquire. And I'm going to pass this on to you. You probably don't need this, but.
Yeah, well, it's rather working around, but and have my back to everybody. Well, thank you for being here. This is home for me. This is my alma mater, and I spent 10 years as board president here as well. So a lot of time spent in this library and trying to do good things. So it's great to see the way the school looks and the things that are happening, and to be asked back to do some things here tonight. I want to be responsive to what you want for tonight. And what I heard ahead of time was you'd like to talk about some advocacy, how to work on advocacy from the local level. Happy to talk about that. First thing I should probably do is scare you to death. Although, you know, the way I look at this is both an opportunity that I've waited. I hate to say this, I'm officially older than the Capitol building now, but my first legislative session after I came home from law school, I had passed the bar exam in Ohio. I always tell people that I was third on the Ohio bar exam, safe in the knowledge that they print the top two names. So, but Neil Kelleher, Assemblyman Kelleher at the time, had seen me play Teddy and Fiddler on the Roof here. My senior year, I worked for him for 10 years. He never called me anything but Teddy. So I was out in Ohio. We were living in Ohio and I was looking for a job, and Neil called me up and said, Dave, you don't know this, but your wife wants to come home and you work for me. So that's how I got my first job, and I came back to our district. So 43 years later, I finally got the year that I've been waiting for years. Now, the way I'm going to describe it, it's not going to sound like an opportunity, but it truly is. But think about this for a minute. You've probably been reading, but you've got two separate efforts by the state of New York going on at the same time. The first one has gotten more attention, and that's the governor wanted to cut Save Harmless, and she wanted to change the inflationary factor in the state funding formula last year. And it took everything we could do in the educational community to stop that. Save Harmless, for those of you who might not know, if you get $1 million, if your school district gets $1 million from the state, just as a figure, and you have fewer students or you lose money under the 76-page state aid formula in any category, the Save Harmless provision says we're still going to give you that $1 million this year because the state recognizes that your costs don't necessarily go down because you lose a few students. You don't lose the whole fourth grade, you just have a few fewer students in each grade along the way. And the state of New York, during the Great Recession, lost 1 million people. Okay? And the state losing 1 million people was the second largest outward migration in United States history. This will give you a little history lesson, second only to the Dust Bowl of the Great Depression. So almost every school district has lost kids, especially upstate. They have lost dramatic. In my members, I run the Rural Schools Association, and I don't have any member that I know of that hasn't lost about a third of their students from the high point of when they were initially built. So really, really tough to eliminate that Save Harmless provision, because it doesn't matter whether you've got 24 kids in fourth grade or 17 kids in fourth grade, you still got to teach fourth grade. So you don't lose those kind of costs, right? Well, here was the governor's argument. I'll try and be brief about it, but her argument was, in essence, schools have a lot of money in reserve. Schools are allowed to keep 4% of their revenue in reserve for emergencies and to smooth out the tax rate from year to year. So she said they're flush with reserves, they've got all they're allowed to have, and they haven't returned a dime to the taxpayers, so we're going to force them to spend down, okay, by giving them less school aid. And until I started mouthing off on camera from one end of the state to the other, and they said, why can't schools do what the governor has suggested? I said, well, we're following the governor's example, actually, because the state of New York has lost people. Her big argument was, why should we be paying for kids who aren't in school anymore? Right? Well, I said, the state of New York has lost 1 million people. The state of New York has lost a population. The state of New York is flush with reserves, 20%. The state of New York currently has 20% of its revenues in reserve, and she was asking for another $5 billion. We have $45 billion in reserves right now, without 1 penny of it being returned to the taxpayers. Okay. And I said, we haven't cut the amount that we're spending for the exact same reasons the state of New York hasn't cut spending. State of New York's got fewer people, we've got fewer students. But the state of New York's costs are higher than they were before. And the state of New York, the people who remain have greater needs than the people had a generation ago. Okay? We have issues now post-pandemic and post-Columbine and Sandy Hook and any of the other 3 dozen that you might want to name. But we've got emotional needs for students and learning needs for students that are different than I could have dreamed of when I sat at that end of the table. Okay, we didn't have to worry about those things. It's a different day. And the costs for doing those things are, as a consequence, much different. So I said, we're actually taking the governor's example. We're taking the exact same approach that the governor said. And then she made a misstep because she also said that she wanted to change the inflationary factor of the formula. And the inflationary factor says we're going to adjust the formula according to inflation every year to recognize that it might cost you more to buy the same things next year as it does this year. And she said, we don't want to adjust it according to what it actually was anymore. We want to adjust it according to a 10-year average. And as I put it, kind of snarkily, you throw out the Russian and American judges' scores and then you come up with the rest. But she wanted to get an average, a 10-year average, throw out the high and the low. And the consequence being that it dropped the inflationary factor in half, which gave schools, between the two of them, Save Harmless would cost schools about $150 million, and the inflationary factor would cost schools about $350 million. So we were looking at $500 million reduction between the two of them. The problem that she obviously didn't foresee from a political standpoint, because you can mess with Save Harmless if you're this governor without causing yourself a political problem, because most of the schools that are affected are not in areas that would have supported you statistically or gotten you reelected. When she messed with the inflationary factor, she turned New York City into a Save Harmless district. That's a whole completely different political calculation if you're the governor, because her power base is there, right? Even though she's from upstate, her votes largely come from downstate. And so that was a different calculation, and we were able to put that off. So that brings us to today, because we had been asking for years for the state to do a study to update the foundation aid formula. You've probably heard year before last, the year before that, the state was crowing about the fact that they had finally fully funded foundation aid. Okay, after 18 years, after our Court of Appeals, our highest court, ordered them to do that, they finally complied. And year before last, they gave schools as much as the court had told them to 18 years before. I mean, think about that. It took them the entire length of a child's life between birth and graduation from high school for them to comply with that court order. But they did. And when they finally did, we said, okay, well, you've complied with it, but the costs are completely different than they were 18 years ago, and student needs are completely different than they were, and we needed updating. And we hadn't been successful in getting the governor to allocate any money to the state education department to study that. Well, this year, she said, I'm not going to give $1 million to the state education department. Dave's comment. The governor doesn't control the state education department. Under our constitution, they're separate from the governor's control, other than their budget has to be approved. She said, I'm going to give it to the Rockefeller Institute. I'm going to give them $2 million, and they're going to have 8 months to come up with a report on how we should fix not just Save Harmless or the inflationary factor, but I want them to look at reworking all of foundation aid. And that's happening right now. There were hearings over the course of the summer, and December 1st, they're going to release the results of that study. Just in time for the governor to then, in December, as a practical matter, what happens is state agencies of the state submit their budgets. The governor puts that into her budget so that when the legislature comes back, she can do her state of the state message, and she can do her executive budget proposal, and hopefully incorporating in the recommendations from the Rockefeller Institute. So that's happening on one track. So we're going to figure out what we're going to pay and how we're going to pay for it on one track. Okay? Fine. Now we have another effort, completely separate, distinct, and not working in concert in any way with the funding effort. The state education department has an effort going right now to change the graduation requirements, change the pathways to graduation, change the assessments for graduation, and leaving it up to every district to determine what the best pathways to graduation are for every district in the state of New York, subject to approval by the Board of Regents. So I say nothing's happening in public education this year, except every single thing. Okay? So we're going to figure out down this track what it is we want to teach, how we want to teach it, how we're going to assess it, and how we're going to determine what success means. And over here, we're going to figure out how we're going to pay for public education, but we're not talking to these guys. And these guys aren't talking to these guys. So theoretically, you'd hope you'd first have an effort to say, here's what we want to teach, here's how we want to teach it, and then these guys that come in and say, okay, if that's our goal, here's how we're going to pay for that. Because the state of New York, I know that many of you will know this, but this is Dave's civics lesson for tonight, okay? If you go back to the US Constitution, you'll all remember there's a provision in there that says that powers not specifically enumerated in the federal Constitution are reserved to the states. Okay? Well, what the heck does that mean? It means there's no federal right to a public education. It's not in the US Constitution. So every single state in the United States individually put one into their own constitutions. State of New York has one, and that's why the state of New York got sued, because the group that sued them said, you're not spending enough to uphold every citizen's right to a sound basic education. And the Court of Appeals agreed with them, said they're not. Here's the real conundrum. State of New York spends more than anybody else. I'm sure you heard Andy Cuomo say it 1,000,000 times. We spend more than anybody else and we don't get the results we want. Okay? And the governor actually parroted his remarks last winter. She said the exact same thing. Well, the reason we don't get the results we want, but we spend more than anybody else, is we're the classic example of having 1 foot in boiling water and 1 foot in ice water. So on average, we feel pretty good. Okay? We do have districts that spend an incredible amount of money per child. Shelter Island, Fire Island, Chappaqua. I can name the districts for you. They're not my districts, but in rural schools. But we have many districts that spend $100,000 a year per student. Okay, that's the kind of tax base that they have within them. I also have school districts that can't raise $30,000 under the tax cap. That's how little tax base they have. Every single other state in the United States of America takes that constitutional provision and says, we're going to provide you, as the state, we're going to provide you the amount to assure that that gets done. Every student will have enough to uphold that provision. They'll get their sound basic education. And if locally, if you happen to be fortunate enough to have a tax base beyond that, to be able to tax your people and they'll support that beyond that, God love you, right? And you can have more, but we're going to cover the bases. What that means as a practical matter is that the states provide 2/3 of the cost of public education in every other state. The state of New York provides 1/3, and it relies on the rest from local taxpayers. We provide more than anybody else, not because of the state's amount that it's put in, but because of the amount that the state relies on local taxpayers to provide. The consequence of that is we have tremendous disparities between districts that have a good financial base, either through high property wealth of people's residences or businesses, or look at the difference. If you looked at Hoosick Falls and you looked at Colony, you can tell that there are districts that have dramatically different tax bases, right? One's got a Wolf Road and a Central Avenue and all of the businesses that are there, and the other's got a bowling alley here, and then 2 miles down the road they've got a Dollar General. I mean, it's just a completely different tax base that they have to work with, and yet the state of New York doesn't have an accurate way, a practical way to determine how much each of those communities can contribute effectively to their own schools and make up the difference, which is what the Constitution requires. Okay, and I just want to drive this home because I don't think it sinks in with people unless I bludgeon you with this, but so I will. Here's the deal. Think what would happen if the police walked in right now and told us all to evacuate because your constitutional right to public assembly had just been suspended. Okay? Or they told you can't go to church because freedom of religion had been suspended. And we're not going to print papers and we're not going to put the news on at night or put it on the radio or on social media anymore because we're a little bit short this month. Okay? That's the difference between a constitutional right and just legitimate things that the state pays for. I'm the first one to admit, and I've told, before I did this for 10 years, I directed governmental relations for the State School Boards Association for 10 years, and I would take 200-300 people into lobby on our lobby day every year. And I would always remind them, as passionate as you are about public education, when you go in to talk to those legislators, just remember, the person who's coming out may be talking about how to save homeless veterans. And the person going in after you is trying to keep the roads and bridges from falling down and falling apart, right? The state has lots of legitimate interests, okay? It's got one constitutional right? Only one that it funds, right? And that's your right to a sound basic education. So you don't just suspend it when you're short. And we've done that a couple of times. To me, it's galling to say it took us 18 years, but we'll take all the credit for finally fully funding foundation aid according to the amount that the court told us to. And the first chance they got, as soon as that court case was dropped afterwards, the very first chance they got, they cut it back. Or I shouldn't say they, because the legislature didn't go for it. Okay, but the governor proposed cutting it back. So both of those things are happening. The SED, and the SED also has, every BOCES has been tasked with having a discussion about regionalism. How do we work collaboratively as a region to try and provide some of the things that we can't do individually because we have these disparities? Okay, the districts that I represent, our claim to fame as rural school districts, and you're one of them, our claim to fame is we graduate as statistically everybody, right? The saying, it takes a village, to raise a child, that's rural schools. When I was a kid, if I were out on Route 2 walking when I was in the 4th grade, this school would have gotten 10 calls by the time I got from my house a mile away, over here, because everybody knew where Dave Little was supposed to be at 10:30 in the morning. Okay, so everybody cares, everybody knows everybody graduates because we'll figure out a way, right? Whatever it takes, we'll figure out a way. Now, here's the dirty little secret. 75% of rural school graduates never get either a 2-year or a 4-year degree or even a certificate from a program. And we don't have enough time to go into all the reasons for that, but the big reason for that is it's not only logistics and trying to get to the college to and from, but the main thing is they've got no help with the FAFSA form, they've got no help, they don't have the guidance support, but mainly it's the fact that our schools don't have the money to offer the AP courses, the advanced courses, the preparatory courses, the International Baccalaureate program, all of those things that get you ready. We can't do that. So we show up for the first day of community college or college, and the first thing that happens is we're tested. And we're told that we have to take remedial programs that we now have to pay for before we ever get to look at what we want to study in college. We have to take those courses first and pay for them when Chappaqua and Shelter Island and Fire Island and even mid-range schools have already paid for those courses in high school. Okay, so there's a tremendous amount of inequity that goes on. So this is, to me, there's a famous quote. I don't know whether you ever saw the movie Patton. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's worth seeing. It's an old movie. It's a great movie. At the end of World War II, General Patton lost his job commanding the troops in Europe, and many would say lost his life, but there's a theory that he was assassinated. In essence, he was hit by a car. But there was a theory that he was assassinated because he espoused the idea that we should take our forces that now had won World War II and send them to Russia and fight the Russians, who were our allies at the time. But his comment was, we're going to have to fight them someday. And they're decimated, and we are geared up like no other time in history. Give me 500,000 gallons of gas, and I'll march to Moscow, and we'll settle this thing right now. Okay. And it wasn't popular. They were our allies at the time, right? But his quote at the time has always stuck with me. I am exactly the right person at exactly the right moment in history with exactly the right vehicle to do what needs to be done. And that's the way I feel right now. I feel like I've done 43 years of working for public education to get to this point, because although it's scary that everything is changing at once, there's a threat out there that we'll get less money. There's a threat out there that the new graduation standards will be a mess. There's a lot of threats in all of this. But there's also tremendous opportunity. The idea that individual school districts can tailor the way that they assess their students and get them to graduation according to who their kids are and what their kids need, because they know who they are and what they need, that's unheard of. That's like the best thing I've ever heard of in education. Short of what, I don't want to give short shrift to my dad. My dad led the national effort to get special ed kids out of institutions and into schools. So I'll give him credit for that. But right after that, 1A is this, right? This is what we're doing right now. And to put it together with the opportunity to make sure that the Rockefeller Institute and the legislature get the funding right for the first time in a generation, that it's, even my accountant says, you're 67 years old, why are you still doing that? That's why I'm still doing this. I've been waiting my whole career for this, right? This is the time that can change education for an entire generation going forward. So any chance that I get to talk about advocacy and what's happening this year, and that all of that, I'm sorry to have I get bludgeoned you with all of that, but the fact of the matter is that's how important this is, right? That's what we're facing this year. That's why it's so important to worry about advocacy. How do we make effective use of what we have to offer in the discussion to try and affect the change that we want? You know, I've been around. I say what I do now is penance for what I did for the first 17 years of my career. I worked 10 years in the assembly and then 7 years in the Senate. Okay, and so now I'm trying. There were a lot of things that I did back then, because it's your job, that weren't as helpful as the things I'm trying to do now. So I'm trying to balance it all out. I got to get this one right, right? But when They have heard from me for so long now that it's white noise. I give them theories. I'll give you an example. Right before the pandemic, now Commissioner Rosa of the State Education Department, but then she was Chancellor. So Chancellor Rosa at the time had a big problem in New York City that the substitute teachers they were getting were horrible, right? They were just bad. So she wanted to pass a state regulation for everybody across the board that every substitute teacher that taught in a New York State school had to be certified in the subject that they were going to sub. And I lost my mind because it was in the true sense of the word. I'm not trying to be critical. I mean this word in the true sense. She was ignorant of what the consequences of that policy decision were. She didn't understand if I had somebody sitting on their couch for a random call on a Thursday to be a calculus teacher or an algebra teacher, I'd already have hired them because I can't find them anywhere, right? It's tough for rural schools to get teachers. And so I had to point that out. And as soon as I pointed it out, right? I say ignorant because they had no personal reference point for how that would play out in rural areas. They knew what they needed in the urban areas. And until Governor Hochul took office, we hadn't had a state leader that touched public education in any capacity that lived north of the Tappan Zee Bridge for over 10 years. Okay, when you think back, even now, Shelley Mayer, the Senator Mayer of the Senate Education Committee chair, is from Yonkers. Okay, DeBenedetto, who is the Assembly Education Committee chair, is from Brooklyn. Everybody, the state controller, the state attorney general, Commissioner Rosa, Chancellor Young, they're from the city or below. They don't have a reference point for how this plays out in an area that they've never been familiar with. So I will tell them, but what that creates is a theory. It's white noise. They expect to hear from me. The only thing if I don't call, then they feel like they have latitude to do whatever because they'll say, well, you didn't call me. How was I supposed to? Okay. But it's you that make them care. It's you guys that make them care one way or the other. You share a constituency. I'll tell you a quick story. I'm up in front of 300 people at my legislative conference. I'm going to go sick them on the legislature. I've got Bob Megna, who is now the head of the Rockefeller Institute, but at the time he was the state budget director, and he's up talking, and I've got a brand new school board member. And back then we didn't have to have mandatory training, so people got elected and they had no idea and they assumed it was a platform for them to talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. And this guy got up in the back of the room and he starts pointing his finger at the state budget director. And you go back to the governor and you tell him that blah, blah, blah. Okay. And Senator DeFrancisco, who was head of the Senate Finance Committee, got up immediately afterwards, and there's this long pause. And then he said, in what world was that helpful to you? And he called the guy on it. He said, if I want to get yelled at, I can go out, on State Street any day of the week, and people will yell at us for what we do. He said, you guys, meaning you, it was a room full of school board members, you share constituents with me. I'm an elected official. You're an elected official. We have a special relationship. I rely on you to tell me what's really happening. You make me care because my people, and I know as a former staff person, I could get up in the conference. Each majority and minority party in each house of the legislature will conference every day on everything that's happening for that day. And then staff members will get up and brief them. Okay. And as soon as the briefing's done, the members will start to discuss. So if the first member gets up and says, I had 5 phone calls about what Dave just talked about, and they're really upset, and I think we need to do something about that. Well, if he says that, okay, they'll take that into consideration. But if somebody raises their hand and stands up right afterwards and says, me too, but it wasn't 5, it was 10, okay? And if the third one talks, you can bet that that's the conference position, okay? Because it only takes like 10 or 15 people, and they think everybody feels that way, because that's all they've heard. Those are the only people that have taken the time to talk to them about it. I'll tell you one more story. my last year here, and I won't tell you her name, but I had an elderly lady who came to every one of my budget hearings. Okay, 10 years, and she was old the first year. Okay. And she said the same thing every year. The last year, I felt bad about it ever since, but the last year I'd heard it one too many times. And what she said was, I haven't had a kid in your school for 30 years. Why would I vote to raise my taxes? And I said, Mrs. So-and-so, for the same reason that I'm paying your Social Security every 2 weeks when I have no idea whether I'll get it. We're all in this together. And I'm betting that you'd rather have kids educated well in this school than have them come and live in your neighborhood coming out of jail. Right? We're all in this together. Right? If Dave calls, it's white noise. If old Mrs. So-and-so calls them, they lose their minds. Because they'll try and twist it. If she calls and says, listen, at the time, there was a time when within half a mile of here, the head of one of the state political parties, the lieutenant governor, and the Senate majority leader all lived within a half a mile of this building. Okay, we had tremendous sway with what happened. Okay, it sometimes worked both ways when you were president of the board, but we had tremendous sway. We don't have that kind of clout anymore, right? But what we do have is an age of electronic advocacy. It used to be that I would have to try and get people to write letters, or I would have to try and get them to jam fax machines. When these guys put out their budget, they're not allowed to advocate for it. They're only allowed to educate people as to what the budget is. They can't tell you that they want you to vote for it. Okay? But all of you can. You can tell everybody that's on your email list. So if the school wants to advocate a position, there's a chamber of commerce in the area. There are volunteer firemen in the area. There's a booster club in the area. There are a lot of people that aren't officially together with the school that can make those legislators, those state leaders care. Okay? Because to us, they're parents. To them, they're voters. I never talked to a state leader about how many kids are in the school district. Statistically, there are 4 people behind every student you've got. So if you've got 1,000 kids in the district, I walk into some legislator's office that represents that school district, and I said, let me tell you how 4,000 people in your district want you to vote. Okay? The dirty little secret of most legislators, although Neil Kelleher told me on my first day on the job, which also happened to be the day that Mario Cuomo gave his first State of the State message, right? So everybody's in the assembly chamber, and I'm sitting next to Neil, and Neil grabs my arm and says, look around this room. He said, when you finish your career here, if you respect the number of people you can count on one hand, you'll be lucky. Okay. Well, I have a completely different view, because I couldn't count the number of people in those years that I have respect for down there. The secret is most of them are very competent people, and most of them care. The other half of that is they can't possibly be an expert in everything that's demanded of them. Every bill in every subject on every topic conceivable gets thrown at them, and they can't possibly know all of that. So I have the same approach with them that I do with doctors. I've been through enough things. I got a couple of Achilles repairs. I got a fake knee, all of this stuff. I'm a firm believer that you have to tell a doctor what's wrong with you and then tell them what to do about it, right? In order to try and get it right, right? Same thing with a legislator. You have to tell them what to do about the problem, and then you've got to show them that there are others that want that done too. So that's the job. How do you get the word out to make them care and to give them a message that changes their perspective on the issue? Because left to their own devices, the governor didn't come up with this idea out of nowhere. The governor came up with the idea to cut public education because in your second year in office, it's happened. I've been through half a dozen governors, and the ones other than Eliot Spitzer and David Patterson, who spent about 47 minutes in office, everyone that had a full term have done the exact same thing. First year, you give a healthy increase so everybody likes you. Second and third year, you cut education because the business community is telling you how much we're overtaxed and how hard it is to do business in this state. And in the last year, because you don't want chaos in the midst of having to run for reelection, and you don't want every school district out there saying that they're going to cut staff and they're going to cut programs and kids are going to be harmed and all that. You don't want to run on that. You don't want to have to go out places and have everybody bring that up. So you give a healthy increase in the year that you run. She's following the same pattern that's happened every single time along the way. So this isn't personal. But I brought up the point that I told you about the fact that it wasn't until New York City was going to be harmed by this that she started to back off. I thought she'd immediately back off because the legislature, to a person, both parties, every single person was against that proposal. Okay. And she still kept after it. She still wanted to get it done. And it wasn't until she made New York City one of the victims that she backed away from it. Right? So you've got to show them what the consequences are. That's the key. Show them what the consequences are, not just from a policy standpoint, to them. What's the consequence theoretically to them, right? Let's say this year, the Rockefeller Institute says, we're spending $35 billion on public education. We need to spend 28. So somehow we've got to cut $8 billion. You cut $8 billion from public education from what the state spends on public education, and that's Armageddon. The place falls apart. Okay? Because when I was on, before I became a board member, I was asked by the board to head up the community budget review, to review the school district's budget. You know what our big recommendation was after we learned how little we had control over what the school was allowed to spend? We said, why don't you hold off a year on replacing the curtain in the auditorium? That was our recommendation for savings, because everything else was tied to some mandate somewhere along the line, either federal or state. So you can't cut that much at once. But they don't know that until somebody tells them what that means in a school that's in their legislative district, and that everybody's going to know. You know, when I tell them about the fact that, you know, because they know it inherently to be true, if I tell them that everybody and their brother's got an email list, if I send something out and I can't have any expectation whatsoever that the person I send it to is the only person that's going to see that, because they may have an email list of 2,000 people, right? Everybody I know might know what I thought I was saying in private that night. Okay? Work that to your advantage in advocacy, because everybody you send a message to individually, not as the school district, but as an individual resident within the district. This is what I, as an individual, think will happen to us if this happens. And that goes out to 10 people that you know, and then 10 people that they know. And it's the way every pyramid scheme is built, right? You know, Amway and Herbalife were built on the concept. You keep expanding the number until it's ubiquitous. Everybody knows. Okay? Well, if everybody knows, and the first picnic they go to, that's what people are talking about, they come back to their conference scared to death about what's going to happen if we let this happen, right? And their perspective on that, one of the quotes that's always stuck with me was, I'm urging one of the legislators to do something. And he said, Dave, I can't help anybody if I'm not here. Meaning that the politics of the situation is every bit as real as the policy decisions. It's not just whether you're doing the right thing or not doing the right thing. Ask Steve Saland, who was a 25-year senator and head of the Senate Education Committee at the time. And Andrew Cuomo got him to vote from his very conservative Hudson Valley senatorial district, got Senator Saland to vote for same-sex marriage. I'm not stating what anybody's position should be on same-sex marriage. I'm just saying That one issue after 25 years and he was beloved got him kicked out of the Senate. Okay, because they wouldn't stand for it in that district. Okay. Steve did it because he happened to think it was the right thing and he was past retirement age. So he said, if I have to die on this hill, I'll die on this hill. And he died on that hill, okay, politically. So when you talk about, we want to do such and such, we want to advocate for this, that, or the other thing, right? Figure out either before or after a talk with somebody like me, what's the politics of this? What's their reaction likely to be from a political standpoint? Because they will always smile at you and say they understand, and 90% of the time they'll tell you, I think we can do that. Okay. And then things will change when the next person walks through the room. Now they have new information, and whether or not they can still do that is up for grabs, right? So you have to create an environment for them that helps you to move that issue along. Social media is the easiest one. Your proximity to the Capitol is the other. You have an advantage that 95% of school districts don't have, which is you're within a drive of going down there. Right? Most of the time, it's not effective to go see a legislator in their office because there are so many people. They call them Tin Cup Tuesdays. Right? There are so many people that are coming into their office asking for things that it's just kind of a cloud after a while. But you can go see them on a Thursday, right? You can ask them here. I mean, that call that I got to come work in the legislature was because somebody asked our state assemblyman to come see Fiddler on the Roof because they thought it would be really good and they thought it was something that their legislator ought to see so that he would support money for the arts in schools. If you've got something good that's going on, invite them. They love it. They love being part of it. They love the exposure. They love the visibility, and they love to be supportive when they can. That's the secret. They're good people and they care. They want to be helpful, right? We just have to create the environment that allows them to do it. So with that, I'll shut up because I've talked way too long, but I'll let you ask questions and we can have a dialogue. I'll still stand up because I really don't want the back of my bald spot facing to it.
I don't have any questions. It was a great presentation.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Does any of the board members have questions? Do you mind taking questions from the kids if they have any?
No, I'd be happy to.
Anyone?
If it was a good presentation, you can thank Linda Ecker, who was my English teacher. So,
Does anybody have any questions?
okay, go get them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What? Yeah, not us.
This is our most recent policy brief. Actually, it's not. That's just our brochure that explains what we're about. But on it is the number for call. Right this second. 518-888. And it really is 888. Such a typical 888-4598. That's my cell phone. So if you've got a question anytime, just over on Nickelville Road, so just call.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
All right, so, we need a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Nina, Kevin, all in favor? Motion carries. That brings superintendent.
Good evening, everyone. We had what I consider to be a really outstanding opening to school. Hiring still continues to be a challenge, and actually the week before school started was quite busy hiring some of the paraprofessionals and some staff that we needed for staffing all the parts of our organization. So I have to give compliments to our administrative team for hustling and really working the phones to try to get the right people in the right place, because you can hire a person, but it's critically important to hire the right person that'll meet our expectations. So kudos to you all for all that work. This year was interesting. There was a lot of last minute registrations, which is very unique to this particular community. And it actually posed a handful of challenges for us with some budgeting and some room numbers and some things like that. So, a couple of takeaways from that. One, maybe some outreach to some local sports for transiency in terms of, getting people to register a little bit early. And two, just some communication on our website, etc., just to get people to come. But they were coming from other areas, like Minnesota and Florida. So some of it, I'm not sure where it was just very unique. It makes me wonder why people are coming. But very different from previous years, which is interesting, and they bring a lot of flavor to our community, which is wonderful. I'd like to give a brief capital project update. One of the things that I'm asked most often is the status of the stadium complex. And Ms. Manning and I had a meeting with our architects and geoengineers, all the people that are associated with that. And they've come up with some sketches for the placement of the track in the competition space based on some environmental concerns. So interestingly enough, we're a district that's kind of on a very high water table. We're one of maybe 2 districts in the whole state that has a wastewater treatment plant. So we had a couple of limitations with where we can put things. And one of the big things that we found out is we actually have to have a retention pond that's adjacent to the scoreboard. So that just kind of shifts things over a little tiny bit. We're not in the design phase yet, but we did get some really good news that the submission to state ed for approval will be in by January, unless something dramatic happens between now and then. And they feel really strongly that it actually can be approved, because that's the only thing that's going in. I should say the only thing. That's the major thing that's going in, and that it can be approved to break ground for late spring. So if it does go break ground late spring, the track and the field in the middle will be offline to everyone. It'll be a construction zone, but we should have it back by mid-October. So the anticipation would be that we would have one coming here next year. Again, anything could delay that between now and then. That's banking on a lot of things, but I'm pleased with what our architects and our engineers and our construction management has been able to do to get us to the point where it's literally within striking range, which is really great. Recently, I sent out a parent engagement a community survey, and actually we got quite a bit of information. They've given us some quality feedback. The survey is still going on. It's just talking about how do you want to see the website, what's the best way to get your information, and as many of you may know, we have a subcommittee of the Board of Education that actually will review that study and make recommendations to our communication specialist. So I do appreciate the input there. That's very, very helpful. As a follow-up to last meeting, we actually had a very brief overview on some considerations with cell phone and social media use in our school community. Not a recommendation to do anything either way, just facts and some considerations. And both of our administrative principals have opined on that. And as a follow-up to that conversation, I think Mr. Rizzo said very eloquently, it's really critically important to hear from our classroom teachers and our staff on how they feel about it, which we did. So we put out a survey, we got many responses. We haven't gotten a chance as an administrative team to go through that yet, but I anticipate that I'll have that next month just to share with you some thoughts. And like many people at the table, it's mixed. I would say right now, in looking at it quickly, there's more people that are certainly leaning towards very strict restrictions on it, but there's, definitely not an equal number, but many people are feeling, that maybe there's some safety considerations. Maybe there's something about teaching the kids how to use it. So it's very interesting. I think it mirrors what you see out in other places. And so I just think it's a critical piece to the overall conversation. Safety. Our principals have done a really great job of getting on top of our drills, fire drills, safety drills, etc. And one of the things that's very frustrating, I want to say it hasn't happened here yet because I don't want to jinx anything, but you can see many local school districts really struggling with swatting, fake reports, and it's really causing chaos to some of our neighbors. So as an administrative team with our SRO who's here, we are trying to learn from every different incident that's happening to our neighbors. What can we do? What should we do? Because things change over time. One of the things that we hadn't really put a lot of consideration in, but we did, was the after school time. We spend most of our time, as we should, during the school day. What do we do if this happens during those hours? But after school, campus is quite busy. What would we do if a call came in? Who would be notified? Talking through all those things. And actually, Deputy, I almost called you Deputy Kyle, sorry, Deputy Loper, we went with our athletic director immediately to start talking through those pieces and parts. And we learned that due to the Bethlehem incident that happened a week ago. So I felt terrible that our neighbors had gone through that, but it was an opportunity for us to learn and grow, and I'm sure there'll be more having to do with that. I do think it's important to know that we have a couple layers to help us mitigate some of those online things. Certainly we have our SRO and all the information that we can bring to our system to help us with that. But we also have the worrisome online behavior. It's not an app, it's a program, and that scans all of the digital world and social media for veiled threats, anything related to this catchment area. So we can get notifications from something as simple as a student feels like they're going to hurt themselves to someone in the community that's not a student that might be talking very negatively about our school district. We get immediate alert. Not only do we get alert, the sheriff's office gets an alert, Western Health and Safety gets an alert, and it's really just another protective layer to be able to look at all that's going out in the digital world, because we couldn't possibly do that. So I feel really good about that, and I do feel very supportive of having that. Not all schools have that. We happen to be one that has it. We also have the Stop It app, which admittedly not a lot of kids use, but that is to report, anonymously incidents. If they hear something they feel uncomfortable with, or they don't want to tell somebody, they can report those things. So we do have those two additional things in addition to just our personnel that are trained to do. Greenbush Child Care, you might remember the board spoke a lot about our previous child care program. To my knowledge, it's going swimmingly. We actually love them. The communication has been great. The parent feedback has been really good. I'm quite pleased. So in addition to them offering what I would consider to be a better service, I think the cost is even a little bit less. So I'm quite pleased, and we have a 3-year contract with them, and I would imagine that same relationship is going to continue to be positive. I spoke about hiring before. There is a chance that we will have to hire an additional person. It might be a teaching assistant to handle some class size and study hall issues. Mr. Rizzo and Ms. Norton have been bending over backwards to try to make sure the classes sizes are balanced and try to make sure that we meet our teachers' needs in terms of covering those things. But it's been a challenge. As Mr. Little spoke about, we're trying to do more with less. And those are some of the consequences that are associated with some of those initiatives. And then lastly for me, I just want to point this out. This is called the Hudson Valley Guarantee. We are the first school district in this area that's going to be unveiling the Hudson Valley Guarantee. This is going to be on Thursday, September 26th, and actually there should be a decent amount of dignitaries, etc. All of the seniors or students that are eligible to graduate this coming June will be invited. It's a series of things with Hudson Valley. One is a kickoff, literally a celebration to show the kids all the things that Hudson Valley has to offer. Not just, hey, everybody's got to go to college, but here's things that are going on in the careers, here's certificate programs, etc. Then we're going to have an instant midday. So all the students, regardless, like someone like Kayla, who's already going to college, she knows she's already going to go, but they're going to do instant admit. So if something were to happen or there'd be a change of mind or anything like that, they've got that to fall back on. One of the things that we've learned over time is if kids kind of poo-poo and say, nah, I'm not going there, and they're not already admitted, the chances of them getting to do those steps are much more difficult. So that'll be the second phase of this. And then the third phase of it is actually for us to shuttle the kids there, to actually get on the campus and see what a beautiful, wonderful campus it is and all the wonderful upgrades that they've done over time, including some things like with workforce development. So we are putting out a press release. I think it's going to be really great. And I'm really excited that Tamarack kids get to be the first to be a part of that and just give them one more option in their cadre of choices as they look forward to post-secondary. And I will turn it over to administrators. I'm going to start with Mrs. Honorado. Sure. I think it's probably good.
Good evening, everyone. I have a few brief updates for you, but before I get started, I did want to introduce Rachel Comini, who is here in the capacity of an administrative intern. She's going to be working with me in part as part of the certification she's pursuing is school building leadership, and I'm a school building leader. But she's also pursuing her school district leadership certificate as well. So she's going to have some updates for you at the district level in a moment. But we're thrilled to have her working in the capacity of administrative intern with us. But by day, she is a special education teacher in the district. So welcome and thank you. We have some important and also fun events coming up in the elementary world. We have our grades 1 through 5 Meet the Teachers Night next week. We also have our elementary book fair happening next week. The PTSA Color Run is Saturday, September 28th, I believe. And our Elementary Character Education Committee is planning our Welcome Back picnic for October 2nd. So we look forward to those events. I have to agree with Dr. Maloney that our new childcare program seems absolutely wonderful to work with. They're placed in my building. So, you know, I kind of have the day-to-day view of how things are going. The children are happy. The staff are very professional and personable. They're vigilant. They are organized. So we're really happy to have a partnership with them this year. I'd also released last week just a really simple, brief survey on some parent engagement topics that might be of interest to elementary parents, just to see what topics people would want to know more about. And at this point, there are a couple of clear front runners in the area of child mental health. That was the number one topic, and also school safety procedures. So I'm gonna, release the survey again another couple of times to elicit some more responses. But right now, those are the two front-running topics among many. And in the area of school safety, we actually did go into a secure lockout on the second day of school at the elementary school. There was a notice that went out to the community on that. It was very brief, about 5-10 minutes. And our school resource officer was able to very quickly and easily address and resolve the issue out in the front of the building. But from my perspective, I couldn't have been more pleased and proud of how smoothly that lockout went. Staff and students knew exactly what to do, and a lockout is not something that we drill on. But just with our regular, protocols and visuals that we have up, people knew exactly what to do, and the atmosphere in the building was very calm and normal, really. And just so you're aware, a secure lockout, that part of our standard response protocol is when we lock our exterior doors, which are locked anyway. But another important component to that is not only do we not let outside visitors into the building, but we bring any student groups that are outside into the building. So if there's something going on outside our building that might be a little bit concerning, I want all those students inside while we handle that. So that went very well, and hopefully we won't have to do that again this year. But with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Coleman.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hi, as Kelly had mentioned, I am Rachel Abate Community. I'm interning with her as well as with Jody Hoosbear in district level. So tonight I'll be presenting her update on the special ed department that I also get to be a part of as a special ed teacher, formerly in the elementary building with Ms. Sonerato, but now as the middle and high school for self-contained. So they kind of stole me a little bit over here, and now it's really been a privilege to be able to see both parts of the district, which I feel like is a really unique perspective to have, and being able to see how each building runs separately and together, how things are different at each level. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity. So tonight, on behalf of Ms. Hoosbear, she wanted to say, first and foremost, that this has been an incredibly heartwarming year, and there are major glimpses of resiliency in students who may have been struggling in social emotional responses. We have seen positive social emotional responses to students when they are at the start of the year in a great way. It has been a very busy start to the school year, and our teachers are showing that they are also resilient. They are on their feet, ready to go. There's been a great buzz of excitement as we're starting this new school year. It feels like a fresh start, and you can feel that with the students as well. One of the major goals of the SPED department this year is to spend more time on quality assurance and our procedures and clarifying those. Much of this is going to be outlined in a special education plan as a district plan that we will develop, which will establish consistency in information across programs and services. And this is something I'll be working with Ms. Huesbear on as part of my internship project. Our plan is to have the revisions completed by the end of the year, which would be great. Our original timeline was to hopefully get together over the summer and have more of that plan ready. Unfortunately, with both of our schedules, that didn't happen, as well as clerical timelines over the summer with the SPED department. They've been a struggle with the need for secretarial support in the summer, as Mrs. Perfetti is only a 10-month employee. So the special education office has little to no support in the summer. Nevertheless, given the increased needs of the special education students and the increases in classrooms and services, including the creation and restructuring of 2 classes in the middle and high school, we are proud to see our students. We've also been able to bring several students in from outside placements back into their home district, and they are doing very, very well. Some of them happen to be in my classroom, so I'm going to say a little extra that I'm proud of them for how well they're doing coming back into our home setting. So thank you very much. I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Ken Rizzo.
Good evening. First, I want to give a shout out to our students. Quite a turnout tonight. Just looking at the crowd, coming out here. So kudos to everyone. I almost would think there's an assignment or something attached to this tonight, the way the turnout came tonight. So seeing Ryan and John and Haley and all the faces out there in the crowd. See Omar back there. So it's a late night. Thanks for coming out, guys. Mrs. Norton is here this evening as well. We have our middle school back to school bash this evening. Just want you to know she's here in spirit, but she's over helping the middle school students today. So thank you to her and to Mr. Medved for organizing that great event for our students. I want to talk about our goals today to start, and our building goal. First one is attendance. Over the summer, Ms. Norton was spearheads attendance for our building. We looked at our policies and procedures, updated our handbooks. We moved to a new digital absentee form for parents, which I think is really helpful versus calling in when you're absent. Didn't work very well. We're finding better results now with parents using that digital form. It's a nice little change. We have 5 and 10-day letters for students who are absent chronically. Home visits, work with probation. We're really trying to cut down on the students who are chronic, which is defined as more than 10% of a school year. In a 180-day school year, that's 18 days or more. Last year, we had about 6% of the middle school, 8% of the high school that was chronically absent. So we want to try to reduce that down so students are not missing more than 18 days a year. We understand things do happen. Students are out, but those days do add up quickly. We also had a lot of new registrations, and it made me realize that some of the new registrations that came in, new students in our district, came in with a history of absenteeism as well. So it reminded me just that this is a broader issue across our state, not just a Tamarack issue of the value of education, the importance of being in school, and just seeing that being an issue all over. And we're trying to combat and get kids in school so they can graduate and be successful. So we're working hard on attendance. We'll continue to. SEL and DEI. Again, Mrs. Norton is spearheading a DEI committee this year with students to engage students in this process. We've identified some students who are work collaboratively with administration and come up with ideas for inclusivity and how to make our school a more welcoming place. So that's a big step for our DEI and SEL and character, using second steps and looking at some character programming. Working really hard to partner with PTSA this year. We're having meetings outside of regular meetings with Lori just to really talk about more of the middle school and how we can really embed the PTSA more into our building this year. So we're excited about that and where things are going thus far. Actually, Lori came to our team leader meeting this week as well with other teachers. So it's off to a good start. And then parent partnerships is a big one. I want to let you know that our opening day faculty meetings, we had two days of meetings for the faculty, had a little fun with them, some activities, and went through back to school routines, procedures. We also talked about parent partnerships. The staff did a little activity together and brainstormed, posted notes, and had an article they reviewed and sort of brainstormed some ideas of things they're currently doing and sharing ideas about parent partnerships as well. So we're taking that very seriously in terms of how to work with families. Just continue to improve that. Open house next week is a great opportunity to bring families in. It's always a little bit of a struggle as you get to upper levels. You find that attendance does drop off from elementary to middle to high school. So we're hopeful to get as many of our high school parents especially in next Thursday for that. Those of you in the crowd, remind mom and dad, open house, come on in. I know sometimes it's one of those things that high schoolers don't tend to share at home. I have one of those at home and doesn't really share too much what's going on unless he needs something like something signed or money. But it's important to have your parents come in and you can work with them to help you be successful. I want to mention academic eligibility. I'm just going to Ryan. I'm going to report back after the first 5 weeks. I promise you, I didn't forget that and how we're doing. But I want you to know that we rolled it out. Thank you to the board for approving things in August. We've communicated with students. We had assemblies beginning of the year to briefly talk about the new policy, also with our faculty as well. There's no carryover to start the school year, you may remember. So after 5 weeks, we're going to see what the numbers look like, how many students are on that list. I'm really hopeful the first 5 weeks we don't see a lot. Typically, the first 5 weeks of the school year are a lot of review material. And it's a great opportunity for students to get off to a good start. I'll be curious when we get in the winter time what numbers look like, but we're going to look at that and then how that starts to play out. So I will get back to you on that, I promise. I don't want to step on Kayla's shoes here. Welcome to the board this year, Kayla Bedoin. She and I met today. We meet monthly, and I know she's going to talk a little about the counseling center and some activities there. Kudos to our counselors, done a lot of great things. I'm going to let Kayla speak more of those things. But thank you very much.
And can I just ask you to follow up on one brief thing? I know we had a really interactive conversation about cell phones last time with the start of the school year. Have you noticed anything or any patterns or anything? Just as a follow-up to.
I noticed a lot of things. Can I ask the students? What have you noticed about phones this year? Always, how the halls looked with phones? Good, bad, no change, any change? Especially the lobby.
Great.
How so, John?
Not as many.
Yeah, we one of the big changes I think for us we made, it's worked really well. Career tech students, we're trying to find a way to get them in and out of the building efficiently. It's even in the morning, like 8:11, the bus is Todd's getting them out. It's tough sometimes. And then the lunch crowd coming in, they tend to wait for the buses in the lobby. It becomes the kind of area where they congregate. Parents come in, it's just that feel when you come in the building, what is the vibe? And there's a lot of students, sometimes there are too many students. So we've shifted that entry exit point over to the auditorium. It's really helped a lot to then kind of see who's there for what purpose, who's there just for phones, and just monitoring a little better there. So that's a big piece for us, is that the hallway piece. Of course, the classroom's a totally different part of that, but at least for the hallways, what we've seen there. Also, the fact that we just don't get good service, it also helps as well. So thank you, Mr. Wetmore, for that. But
Brady had his hand up.
Brady,
About the same thing that you said. What's better? Here's better.
I will share this. Sometimes I know you're frustrated with service. We have the same issue. Like I literally in my office, if I go to send a picture message, sometimes doing updates, I need to send to my update, whatever it is, I literally have to walk to the front lobby or outside in order to get any service. So please don't think that your principal has special privileges or even your teachers. I guarantee Mr. Olson probably said the same thing down in his room down there. It's not, we don't have that in our building in terms of anything. So we're in the same boat you guys are as well when it comes to even reaching out for families or sending something. It's not the best, but in some ways it's good because it just keeps you guys off of those devices sometimes and focus more on your schoolwork. So that's a positive for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just trying.
I only have a few brief updates today. The seniors this week are selling our class shirts for the pep rally. You're also in the beginning stages of planning both the homecoming dance and the pep rally. I'll probably have more updates on that next meeting. Also, many of us have started to apply to colleges, including myself. Thank you to the school for providing us the services that include the college caravan, which included many SUNY and community colleges and the college kickoffs, which are happening after school. Unfortunately, I could not attend because I did have practices, but that is okay. And then lastly, fall sports have been doing well. There is a volleyball and football game tomorrow, and as I am speaking right now, there's a soccer game. So hopefully we secured a win tonight. That's all I have. Thanks for your time.
I mentioned the college kickoff, but just Caleb mentioned like important. College kickoff is different than the caravan because it's an opportunity for
The kickoff program that Kayla mentioned was an opportunity for students to learn about the application process, and we saw a decline this year. The counselors and students who partook in that, and
one of the things she just mentioned there is important, that students are conflicted with after-school events and athletics. So I think next year, something we're just gonna look at just timing of it, because we know the students want that assistance. We want to try to cater around their schedule. So we've done it before in August, and this last 2 years, first week of school, and I think we're gonna move things around next year because it's a great program. And the caravan is an opportunity for them to meet with college recruiters and learn about the schools as well. So again, kudos to our 3 counselors for putting those opportunities together. We're just gonna assess and probably adjust next year how we run those to start the school year. Thank you.
All right, great. That brings us to board discussions. Anybody have anything? No? So let's do 4.2 through 4.6 on consent. Kevin, Ryan? Any discussion on the softball trip? Everybody is good with that? Anything else?
No, I just want to commend the coach and the program for being really diligent in answering the questions. It's something new for us, so we just wanted to make sure that students had access to the program, and that if students didn't have the same financial resources that another student, that there was a really good plan for them to be able to participate should they choose to do it. I would anticipate more of these in the future, so I think we'll learn from each and every one. So I do want to thank Coach Marsh for working with the board as we got through this process.
All right, good. Anything else, sir?
I wondered about the hockey. How is that? Just more schools helping together?
No, I think it's the same number of schools. I don't know that anything's different. It ebbs and flows throughout the year. Basically, traditionally, Tamarack hasn't had a lot of hockey students, so usually anywhere from like 2 to 3. I think we might have 2 right now. And usually the pathway is through youth hockey, so a lot of those coaches kind of go up that way. So those kids have been playing with each other for years, but it's another example of a merger and how, kids are even digitally connected now. And I think this might be probably like the 6th or 7th year that we've had the hockey merger, and it's going well.
But Troy's help out there?
No, I think Troy is part of a different merger, not this merger.
All in favor? Motion carries. That brings us to policy amendment 5.1. Let's put that on the table. Dina, Leah? Discussion?
I'll defer to the policy committee. Kevin, do you have any comments?
I would say the main revision to the policy is just around, acknowledging that if you want to use our space, that you're compliant with any, regulations based around having liability insurance, et cetera. We just want to make sure that, the groups that come here have the necessary protections in place. But again, our facilities are free or open to use, and that's the form you need to fill out to reserve the space.
Yeah, we didn't make any major changes to some of the prices. We want to make it fairly open to the community. So you'll always notice that things related to like TSA and student groups, things like that are always going to be open. But to Ryan's point, one of the things we want to make sure we're inviting people in at the same time that many of our students have activities, that there's some level of assurance on that group's part that they've done their due diligence, that they're safe people, they're going to use the building in the right way. Otherwise, we don't want them in with our students. So we just strengthen that. We don't have a lot of people that use the building. The groups are usually groups that are known to us, like CYO, etc., things like that, which are mostly our kids. But in this day and age, I think it's really important to strengthen that language.
Just a quick clarification there. It's just an application. It doesn't
Oh,
guarantee
good point.
access. The students always come first in the student groups.
That's a good point. We often get spoken to sternly by outside groups that get really frustrated, but this is Tamarack High School, and it's for Tamarack kids first. So an adult group of some sort will never take priority over the kids. Kids get first.
All in favor? Motion carries. So brings us to special ed. 1.1. Let's put that on the table. Kevin, Ryan? All in favor? Motion carries. That brings us to 7.1. A lot of these. Through 7.26. Motion put that on the table. Dina, Ryan? Any discussion?
Yeah, just want to point out a couple things. There are a couple new teachers that were hired late in the summer, so they find themselves on this board agenda. I want to point out Mr. Brian Mahar. Mr. Brian Mahar is coming to us from industry, and it was actually, Mr. Rizzo and I were struggling, we couldn't find any applicants, we were actually quite nervous, and I had an idea, and I said, what if we reword the request? And he immediately reached out to Mr. Rizzo. Mr. Rizzo called me, even though he doesn't have cell phone service, he found some to give me a call and said, please reach out to this guy right away, and it really was a great fit. We're really happy to have him on board. I think he brings a lot of business industry into a business position, which I think is going to be a really great fit. We were also lucky to find an ELA teacher for a last minute change, Ms. Amanda Rocher. She has a background in communications and Spanish prior to becoming an ELA teacher, so I think she brings different writing and industry perspective into that as well. And the rest are pretty standard for the most part. We have a couple volunteer coaches that are on here, and a new club actually. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to defer to Mr. Rizzo because you probably know a little bit more.
I told the students you're going to ask me. This is why we have to be. I said I might get asked. So we have some students who are interested in recycling, interested in cleaning up grounds and
like the courtyards and stuff.
They mentioned courtyards, but more so even like the roads and anything like garbage wise. They really want to. So econ, we're on the spot here, but environmental. Cleaning operations. Clean operation. Yep. Thank you. And they're working with this French. They really want to get back to the community and make it more environmentally friendly, especially with recycling. A lot of that working with McCormick and how we can get that back going. At one point we had recycling years back, and then the waste companies changed and it kind of went by the wayside. So it's something that we're interested in doing. So excited to see how it goes. There are possibly trips possibly down the road. Some cool ideas. And those are some good numbers too. Kids who want to do it. I'm sorry?
Leadership League Club with Ms. Norton.
Leadership League Club.
That's the DEI.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the DEI initiative with that group. And actually, that's a consortium that meets with a bunch of other schools in other West Argosies. They talk about issues that are related to not only their school but in the community, and they bring that back to their school.
All right, all in favor? Motion carries. And then just to, superintendent's business recommendations, 8.1 through 8.6. We'll put that on the Brian and Kevin. Any discussion?
Just to mention a couple of things, I do want to point the board's attention to 8.4, which is the transportation contract with SAR and SRAN. To anytime we have to contract out a bus run, and this year right now we have 2 currently, and it could be more, it is exceptionally more expensive than if we have our own internal people. So that recruitment process of having drivers on board, having substitutes is really important. We do have a few drivers in the hopper, and Ms. Fanning and I are really hopeful that we can bring some of those runs back. 1, we want to drive our own kids places, but 2, the cost is unbelievable. And because the market is so incredibly competitive, because every district is in the same spot, they can literally kind of charge whatever they want, because we have to transport them. We literally have no other choice. So it becomes quite pricey. So just keep an eye out on that. We did it for the first month. This is an extension. Fortunately, Ms. Fanning was able to work out something that we don't have to have them for the entire year. So once we're staffed, we can pull that back, which is great. And that's not always the case. So I think that was a really good
The contract routes or is it sorry.
contract.
Oh, these are deep. So one of them is, so they're both private schools. So we've got one that's going to CBA, St. Pius, and Catholic High, and the other one is Troy Prep, the charter school.
Is the contract month by month or?
So I think we have to give them only a week notice to get out of it. Yeah, shocking. Yeah, actually, 10 days. I can't remember if I could 7 or 10. It's short.
And then I also just want to point out our donations. It's especially at the beginning, it's so incredibly heartening that people will just reach out to us and ask us what we need. And we had a donation from Carrie Lizelle. She brought a car full of wonderful backpacks full of high quality school supplies that we were able to distribute pre-K through 6. And we don't often get donations for the older kids, so it was really neat. And I went into Snort's office and the kid was picking through to get some supplies up. That was really, really great. And also, Mrs. Honorato has an elderly couple from the community that every single year call her and just say, what can I give you? and gave her $100. So she did various things. So we have this periodically. I just want to point that out that, you know, these people haven't had kids in 1,000 years in our district, but they still wish to give back to our most needy students, which I really appreciate.
All in favor? Motion carries. So brings us to public comment.
Sorry, I'm a little sick, so don't mind that. My name is Tess Gates. I'm a senior here. And my question is regarding the elementary pickup. I've been allowed to pick up my little sister since last year. And last year, the process was relatively simple. They would call the children down and then they would come and I bring them to my mother. However, this year now they're requiring a sign-in, and I'm curious as to why, but it's
I wish Mrs. Honorado was here to answer it specifically, but it's more for security so that we have a record of who's picking up what child and where they're actually going. But, so I would definitely encourage, if there's an issue with it, just make sure, you know, mom reaches out to Mrs. Honorado and just, we can work through the particulars. But just so we have a record that, oh, today, Tess was picked up by grandma, mom, whatever.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm wondering if seniors will get more freedoms or be more. I'm wondering if you'll get more like rights as like senior, like you can go across the road, bigger lunch period to get food or.
So I'll defer mostly to Mr. Rizzo, but I will say I would never be supportive of going across the street. I think that's a huge liability on the district. It's actually considered a major highway. So as much as I totally understand and want you to grow and learn how to have more freedom, that kind of thing, I trust you guys. Half the time I don't trust the drivers. So want to add anything to that? But that's why we have the Bengal Bistro. It's true. It's really true.
Ryan,
Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan. Stated, but just to go off what Evan said about like the secret privileges, like I know what you just said about like if it's liability and everything. I understand that, but like what about like being able to drive? Because I understand walking. I understand how that's like a lot different than if you were to drive, like over across the long, especially having Stewart, Coco, Tommy's right there. I understand like going down Queen Street. That's too much. But just wondering how like what you're taking on driving.
I really put a lot of thought into it, but I think I'm landing at the same place because we're a closed campus, which means we stay everything on there. But you know, this is why it's a democratic process. You know, you go and you start and you get appointed with Mr. Rizzo. You talk through things. We look at policy concerns. Honestly, though, if I'd be candid with you, Ryan, I want you guys on campus because that's where I can keep you most safe. To be candid.
Probably that question off
Not soon enough. To be honest with you, the state is a little bit behind on that. We're waiting for more guidance. So the Blue Ribbon Commission has made recommendations that are kind of overarching that there will be options, but they haven't at this point. I would be shocked if there wasn't Regents exams required for this school year. I don't anticipate this to be a change into the future. I could be wrong. I don't think so, though, but I could be wrong.
Ryan.
Hi, I'm Phil Ryan, and my question is, I'm wondering if the there will be
I would like to rent.
or just like to go on.
That's a good question. Honestly, we'll probably be updating our facilities to incorporate that. We in general have been a very open campus in terms of after school and those kind of things, but because of the nature and the expense of it, that would probably be something that we would have to talk about. I would imagine that the board wouldn't want to restrict the track though, because many of our community members use that, but I'm sure it would be up for conversation. Good question.
Hi, my name is Brady Briggs, and I'm a senior. If the district were to take or limit access to our phones, would it be during the 2024-2025 school year or one of the following school years?
I don't know that there's I know that there's not a plan, so I don't see anything right this minute. I think it's something that's going to continue to be in development. However, the governor has said that she's gonna come out with something, so if the governor does and makes that rule, then obviously we would have to follow through with that. It's a challenging conversation because we want you to know how to use them appropriately, but we also want you to be engaged in your schoolwork. We want you talking to other people. We don't want you on them at lunch because we want you to learn how to adult.
Hi, I'm Kelly Blake, and I'm a senior here, and like pursuing a career in early education has always been like a goal for me. And last year I asked my guidance counselor if I could like go to elementary school during my study halls and just like kind of shout out, and it was a great experience. So my question is like, could this become some sort of like volunteer opportunity organized and available to other students? Maybe not just like limited to like teachers, but like other opportunities you have in school.
I'm gonna answer that, and Mr. Rizzo, if you have a different answer to this, let me know. I think we kind of have it already with TLC, where the students sign up and they go over and they're assigned to a teacher and they do some volunteerism. But I think there's always an opportunity with some forethought and some planning to expand that, because I think any elementary teacher would say more hands are better than no hands. So particularly at wintertime, like booths and things like that, but there would have to be really, structured. So I'm glad you had a great experience. In a perfect world, we would have something called CEIP, which is a business program where students actually have formal internships. And for many students that want to pursue education, that's one of them. So hopefully in the future, we can have that.
Janine. Hey, I'm Janine Cascount, 546 Tamarack Road. Here in the district, I have a 7th grader and I have a student who is a class of 2024. I just wanted to talk a little bit about modified sports here. I don't know if the board's aware, but the girls modified soccer team had to get canceled, unfortunately, because there wasn't enough interest. And so I wanted to maybe just bring it forward so that you guys could maybe think about this moving forward, maybe look at addressing how sports are looked at here at Tamarack, understanding what Mr. Little was talking about and how our enrollment is down, but the length and the longevity of the sporting here at Tamarack. If you don't have these younger middle school kids able to join a team, we're not going to have a JV team, or we're not going to have a varsity team down the road. So a couple of things that I looked at as I was kind of throwing a few things together. I couldn't see in our Tamarack Student Athletic Handbook any differentiation between JV or varsity or modified policies or procedures or anything like that to truly find out what modified sports are. So I went to, and I'm going to say it wrong, but NYVISTA, that New York State Public High School. So what they talk about is a desirable modified interscholastic program will encourage participation at several achievement levels, and that interschool competition in a modified sports program should encourage participation for as many children as possible. And that's kind of what I really thought maybe we could try to drive home as a community. And there's maybe a few ways that we could try to look at it. As a parent who kind of just went through this, I just experienced it, and my daughter just experienced it as well. So registration and communication regarding fall sports is difficult. So for 6th graders who are moving up to 7th grade, when 7th grade is the first time they may have the opportunity to join a school sporting team, if they don't know about it or they don't bring any information home to a parent about how to register for a team, what registration looks like, when registration has to happen, it's difficult. And so for soccer, it's in the summer, right? Registration happened over the summer. So it was information that went out both on our website and on social media accounts. I'm a parent. I'm not checking the website over the summer, so it's difficult. I'm not. I'm not. I'm sorry. I checked out with my kids. So that was one thing to maybe look at. And then I thought about in the elementary school when they had 5th grade band, right? The way that it's introduced to 4th grade parents is spectacular, right? There's a letter that's sent home. They have 4th grade band information night where all the parents are invited during a time where it's the school's open and parents are going to be there. I don't know if it's during the art show or it's during something, but they have 4th grade band information night. Maybe 6th grade parents might appreciate having that information to know when they can go, what modified sports are, many kids in our district may not have played in an organized sport before because it's expensive, right? I mean, there's a cost to play on club sports. There's a cost to play on travel sports. Some travel sports are $1,000. I don't think there's a fair amount of people in our district that are gonna put their kid in a travel sport. So it may be their first time to be able to play in an organized sport, and they don't know how to do it. They don't know what sports are available, they don't know how to register, they don't know the importance of getting into Family ID, having physicals done, and all of those things that need to get done. So that communication and registration piece could maybe be something that we could potentially look at. I'm just kind of throwing it out here. But I think the fourth grade with fifth grade band does a really good job. The other thing that was really tricky was this testing up piece, the APP, the APP exam. So there's not a lot really written in it, in our athletic handbook, except in order to test up, you have to reach out to the athletic director 2 weeks in advance, and you have to have the okay from the coach to be able to do that, right? The invitation from the coach. Well, many people don't know how to go about doing that. So more of an outline or a policy or procedure regarding how to do that might be helpful for people that are just coming into this. If we're only looking for students who have that experience of being on a sport team from travel or from club, and we're not really bringing in those other kids who have never had that opportunity to play a sport, like they're asking us to do, participation as many kids as possible, we're missing out on a lot of kids to start that, right? We all know how important being involved in a team sport can be for many different reasons. Especially here within our community, right? We have a large population of kids that we would all benefit from it, I think. So then the last thing I just wanted to kind of bring up as maybe something to potentially look at is we've all talked about it, that we're putting all this money into having these new sports fields, right? So if we're trying to do due diligence, we really want to make sure that our teams are able to play on these new sports things, right? We just committed a lot of money, and I'm sure our community wants to know that we have teams that are going to be able to go out and play on those fields. So I just wanted to bring that forward, and I think
If I could just add, Mrs. Cascon wrote a very thoughtful, polite email just regarding and questioning some of the things related to the modified sports team. But one thing that really stood out was the conversation about equity and talking about how there really is a bifurcation with kids that play club sports and come up from the very young ages. So one of my huge takeaways, and I appreciate you bringing this up, is we're going to be taking a different look at, okay, what's the outreach to the kids that haven't been involved? Like, first of all, targeting them, and then looking at that, because the kids that are already in it, they already know, they already have that pathway, but really doing that. And even talking about, like we have the morning kickball, should that be extended to other sports? What can Beat do in some more intramural? So trying to add some layers to those pieces to introduce kids more. So thank you.
Hello, my name is John Cameron. I'm a senior here, and I just had a question about senior lounge privileges. I always kind of looked up to excited to be a senior just to have a senior lounge, seeing the Xbox and stuff. So I was just wondering if that was ever coming back or if it's coming back this year or what's going on with that.
This one, have fun to
I don't have the staffing, John. I don't even have close to the staffing. I have study halls right now with 35, 30, 40 people in it. It's a safety issue. And if I had that settled, then I could consider staff to maybe to do. I'd love to have that, do that. But years ago when that was done, we had more staff. It lost over the years. And when there's a staff member, it also was a supervision. That's not supervised anymore. So right now, the honest answer is I have no way possible to even be able to do it. I tried to get creative at one point a year or two ago, trying to do it, but we're just so hard right now in terms of what we have for human resources, even hallways. I don't have anyone in the halls for supervision, things like that. There's a lot of areas where I wish I had more human beings, and substitute teachers were always short on. So if something becomes possible, I would love to collaborate and bring that back, find a space for it. So it's not a matter of not wanting it and not seeing the opportunity for you guys to enjoy your senior year. It's just a matter of what we have for resources. I'm sorry, we lost it with COVID. It never came back.
Sarah Raymond. Hi, I'm Sarah Raymond, and my question is how can Surratt create more opportunities for teens and seniors to explore careers? Can you say that last piece? I'm sorry, to explore careers. Oh, great question. I twofold, and I'll defer to Mr. Rizzo again, if you have anything
What
better
was the
than
exact question?
it was,
Explore
how
careers?
can we create opportunities for juniors and seniors to explore careers? So I think things like the Hudson Valley Guarantee that I talked about are opportunities that we can have. I think we also can capitalize on digital things that are already out there. There's virtual tours, things like that. I also think our counselors are doing some really inventive and unique things. I think Mr. Rizzo alluded to it. We've got to be able to match up your schedule because everybody out here is busy and you're doing all sorts of things with a time where you can sit and maybe be with your parents and learn about those things. But I would say it's always a work in progress, and I'm certainly open to ideas. We do have affiliations with things like Rensselaer County Chamber, and I'd love to see more people come in. But I think one of the challenges that our instructors have is the curriculums are so packed with all the things that we have to teach. It's hard to give away some of that time to have speakers and things that you'd like to have. But I would like to do more of that too.
What about something like a career, more of a career fair? I know they have a career day, but more diverse. Or a
Great.
separate one.
Great point. Maybe what we can do this year, and I'll talk to the counselors about it. We've done the college fair, we've done the career fair. Maybe we can ask people in the community, like, what ideas for careers? Maybe just to expand the horizon. Some of the new careers out there that we don't even know that are just emerging. So.
Hi, Thomas King. I'm a senior at Tamarack, as well as a co-president of the senior class. One of the responsibilities I have as co-president is to come up with fundraising ideas. And one of the ideas recently, as well as last year, is to run middle school social, like one we have going on planning for to make some money for our plans that you all know. While planning, we have been told by our advisors that it has to be done right after and not when we were in middle school, excuse me, later at night. So my question is, what are the rules and regulations about middle school socials? I can speak to that.
Yeah, so Tommy, so first off, today it's not for school, we did it in the evening. Our philosophy is having middle school programs look different than high school programs. Middle school students, typically we don't want them here as late as often as we have high school students for dances and stuff. So we do run some evening programs for middle school, like tonight. We just don't believe that every program should be evening programs for middle school students. When we have the programs throughout the school year, we're encouraging the ones that we are doing the evening for students to be able to attend to do it between sports seasons. But it's something that, having a senior graduation versus the 8th grade moving up ceremony, they're different programs. Also for staffing, we get a lot more staff involved and students with transportation issues too. When after school, middle school, they stay through and then get the bus home versus having to come back for. So it's also a benefit for our students and also for staff who are here. We have more staff that are able to supervise and be part of it, and the staff that actually works with the kids, like the teachers for those teams. So there's really a lot of benefits, and just having it look more like a middle school experience, a little different than the high school experience. So that's really the long answer to the whole thing. And tonight it's an evening program, but we don't want every one of those to be evening programs for those reasons.
Arthur?
And I heard the question about cell phone policy brought up here and there, and I was thinking about how it could also be used to advantage of how if students in, let's say, a study hall or free period lunch or something like that could have an opportunity to use their phone if they are caught up with all their schoolwork, so they can engage with their schoolwork and still be able to do the work, but still also be able to use their phone as well. So it'd be kind of like just like a reason to do your work. So it'd be like a win-win.
Like a reward.
Yeah.
I think that certainly can be part of the conversation. The one thing we didn't do is survey students, and I think that we could probably think about that next. And, obviously the questions would be different from the way an adult would see it versus the kids. You bring up a really good point. Something to think about.
I'll just add, there's an interesting video out there I'd encourage you to watch about a teacher who did an engagement study on students and cell phones. And during a class, she had all the students with the phones down, and how many times notifications went off during a single class period. It was in the hundreds, like 300, 400 times one class period. And it just shows how the students with the phones are there. Their interest in their brain is not on structure and what's going on. It's a big piece of what people miss, like not seeing that the reason why you're in school is to learn, and it takes away from that. And just how many times our phones, even me, I'm sitting here, my wife will text me, I'm like, it takes away from my focus on what's happening here. And we're all connected to them. So it's a big part too, something that I encourage you to look at in terms of the mental health piece for students as well. It's hard for some kids to balance that. Some students are better at it than others. Some students can do that. Others really walk around with like zombies with phones too. So.
That video Mr. Rizzo talking about, I would encourage anyone, kids and parents, to take a look at it. It really is eye-opening, and it speaks to the anxiety that kids feel, even if their phone is taken away from them. They don't have it, but worrying about what they're missing and that they're not engaged in what they're doing because they're worried about what's going on. It's really very telling.
Just Google teacher, student, cell phone engagement class. It'll come up. It's a pretty interesting video. It's an ABC like study thing. They show the classroom.
Powerful.
Nick Simon, 77. I have a comment, question. Comment just came to my mind, but I heard a lot about cell phones. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old schools. What the attorney had talked about, I didn't want the messages to students as a parent. My wife, we have no interest in children with cell phones. We won't have an interest in them at school. And I think any parent that has the children understands what a bad issue or a prevalent issue is. So I wanted to just add that to the discussions. My question is on the lockdown for the elementary school. What happened, unknowns or
Sure.
worse than known.
Yep.
So nice to hear.
Yep, this just happened to be a former student here that was coming to wait for their friend, but he wasn't recognized by the people at the elementary school. So once we went out, we realized who he was, we kind of shoot him away. So it's you bring up a really good point. And I tried very hard in my communication to give as much information. You're 100% right. When you don't say anything, it creates all sorts of stories. So trying to find that balance. I think I have to commend Mrs. Honorado. It was, hey, there's somebody out there. And it was like a snap decision. It wasn't, let's go investigate and talk about it. She just made the call. That's always going to be the right call. So I appreciate it. We did try to get out information as soon as we could. You're welcome.
All right. Motion to adjourn. Dana, Kevin, all in favor? Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Have a safe trip home.
Thank you.
I love seeing all of this.
Hours. Remember that, like?
Oh,
I
I
was
do.
gonna-
I did 8 hours one year.
That's what Stephanie
I did my
said.
district for building 1 year, 8 hours.
That's what I-
It was a shaker,
went
so
out
all over, like, all over the world.
Oh, gosh, that's what I'm trying to do.
We have no idea.
So was it a mail?
Oh, county did. Not us. They mail it the same time as they always do. So we have no idea.
Yeah. I wonder if they used a different vendor.
I think they
Oh, maybe that could be.
Yeah, 'cause
They said they sent it out on the.
Because I don't see mine in escrow, so I never know what's
Maybe they should get into everyone by first.
I'm gonna send a letter to her.
Yeah.
She was lovely.
Treat that on
So I feel like if I had asked her, hey, could you put some in the faculty lounge, she probably would have ran right to the store. She was lovely and she wanted her story. No. Oh, so I said, when she had got children there. Bye, Kayla. Bye. She had got children there,
So that's why, and that's why I pushed you.
Yeah.
You just have to let her know.
Yeah.
It's like, I meant so much to her.
It was,
So.
the thoughtfulness in, oh, you know what, I should turn off the thing. The thoughtfulness in the curation of the bag, like, it was a bag I would have bought for my daughter. Like, you know what I mean? It was just so sweet with like little kitchens and little, little things. It was just really, really lovely. She's a wonderful person. Thanks, Mo.
Yeah.